Yep, I'm recording on my system. Go ahead, Kim.
All right, welcome everyone to our segment 1 class for December 2018. This will be the third webinar in which we are looking at chart interpretation via the planetary method of chart interpretation as developed by Jeffrey Wolf Green. First of all, before we get started, I just briefly want to show you our housekeeping slide so you can see the different ways that you can study EA with EAN, the Evolutionary Astrology Network. Anytime you have questions or comments, you can always email us. You can call us on the number below, or if you are on our Segment 1 Facebook page, and that's where we do the Q&A back and forth with people who are in process of studying evolutionary astrology to some degree or knowledge and understanding. So again, this is a term that Jeffrey Green came up with, the planetary method of chart interpretation. Many of you might be somewhat familiar that we use Pluto and the nodes of the moon to have an understanding of the soul from life to life. However, some basics for you to understand. A chart will not show you the gender of the person involved, nor will it show you their evolutionary state of consciousness within their soul. We determine this through observing and correlating, and most of the time that is done through some type of live conversation or questions and answers that they will provide. This gives us the background of their evolutionary conditionings. And then as we consider all of those evolutionary conditions and environmental conditionings, it really then helps us get this determination or understandings of where the soul might be in regards to the evolutionary state of consciousness. And I refer you to some of our beginning classes from 2014 when we looked at those consensus individuated and spirituated states of consciousness and the substates involved within that. So again, one more repeat here. Evolutionary astrology does not like to do a chart blind. Give me the birth data and I'll put it all together. What's the context? What are their environmental conditionings? And so you've got to dialogue, ask questions, or do that written Q&A to give you the background to the chart that then helps you fine-tune the interpretation. Now, here's the list of environmental conditionings that I've put together over the years, okay? Question number 4, religious, spiritual upbringing, current belief system, parent, child, siblings history, economic conditioning, past and current occupation, all their relationship history. And then I always like to have an open-ended question that says, any other vital history that they may like to provide. Maybe they were in a serious car accident when they were 9 years old and it affected their ability to walk. That's a pretty vital statistic in the history of their upbringing. And, you know, it can be pretty open-ended in that, but it again gives us some of that background information that then allows us to go in and fine-tune the chart. Now, another thing germane to evolutionary astrology is that we will look at the phasal relationship between Mars and Pluto to determine the number of lifetimes a soul has been incarnating and working upon a specific Pluto house. Again, There's no specific number. A soul will get to choose how many lifetimes depending upon their desired nature and the will or effort they will put in. However, EA divides them into primary lifetimes when Mars is in a specific 45-degree orb to Pluto. Use a little bit tighter degrees here, separating or applying 5-degree orbs. And by this, I'll show you on the graph in just a moment here so you can see this visually. But then within that, there will be what we call the secondary lifetimes. And that's where Mars and Pluto are in a phasal relationship to each other and there's no aspects, or they are in aspects that are not 45-degree angles, for instance, the trine or the sextile. So here's a visual of this. And again, we just go over here to 0 degrees and make Pluto the slower moving planet the starting point, and we can have the conjunction either 5 degrees balsamic or 5 degrees new. We can have Mars being 45 degrees from Pluto, which will go from that, 40 to 50-degree mark. And as you see, other aspects will start to blend in. And we work our way around 45, 90, 135, 180, and all the way around the chart. So we, again, know that there can be what we consider 8 of those primary lifetimes where there's really a shift in the desire nature of the soul, the understanding of the soul, and working through whatever that Pluto house is. Now, something I've also been stating in this 3-part series is that do we incarnate with Pluto in the 3rd house lifetime after lifetime after lifetime until we get through these 8 primaries? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Intuitively, I think we can bounce back and forth between the different houses. I don't know that we have to live them in a linear fashion and then we move on to the 4th house, 8 primary lifetimes, and then the 5th house, 8 primary lifetimes. I don't think it works that way. We don't come in with Pluto in Virgo lifetime after lifetime, incarnating once every 250 years. It changes the signs and the generations. So I think the houses can be more random, but in the broadest picture, sooner or later, we work our way through all 12 houses and the 8 phases within those 12 houses, looking at it from the perspective of Mars Pluto as a planetary pair. Again, speaking theory here, I don't think anybody has an absolute answer. It's something we're still doing the observe correlate. And so our volunteer, whoops, my little thing is not wanting to do it. There it is. Our volunteer chart before we get into the planetary method is a female, born November 22nd, 1972, 9:54 a.m. in Anaheim, California. We are looking at a chart with true nodes. EA always uses the actual nodes to the time. We don't take the mean node motion on an average daily basis. Porphyry houses preferred method. This person was born into and remains middle class, was raised in the Methodist Church. Parents were educators. Her father died when she was 14. He suffered from alcoholism, depression, and he had cancer for 8 years. This volunteer still lives close to mom. Personalities like oil and water. She had a twin sister who passed away at 4 days old from a birth defect. She has a brother who's 4 years younger. She is married. Her husband is Hispanic. They have an 8-year-old son. She's a grant writer for a homeless services nonprofit. And she has an education, a bachelor's and master's in cultural anthropology. She did not go on to get her PhD because she has extreme fears of flying. She is an introvert, and other vital history, she shared that she has an extreme fear of vomit all her life, whether someone else is doing it or it's something that is happening to her. Might be something we explore over the next couple of hours. Um, she did spend, I think it was 1 year. I got to take that. I might be wrong in the 1 year. I think it's multiple years that she was involved in a fundamentalist charismatic church that she eventually broke away from. And she's been doing spiritual searching throughout her life. So there, as I said, are those environmental conditionings in regards to our background, in regards to the question, her evolutionary state of consciousness. She says she doesn't know. She'd like to have our opinion as we move through this interaction over the next couple of years. So here we are repeating the formula that we've known, and as I've been teaching these three classes, I'm almost like Trinity of the Past. That's natal Pluto by house and sign, and that is the South Node by house and sign. But that almost becomes a quad of the past instead of a Trinity. So I'm about ready to change that languaging. It was just a syntax that I developed. Oh gosh, dozen years or so ago with Jeffrey's daughter, David Green. Um, but natal Pluto is representative of the soul. By house, sign, planetary rulers of house and sign in the aspects. This is the karmic dynamic, or the area to which the soul will naturally gravitate to on an unconscious emotional security reasons in this life. Natal Pluto by sign will be the generation a soul's born into, and natal Pluto by house will be where the individual soul gravitates to. So let's just look at this from the perspective of our volunteer looking at nothing but Pluto itself. We have the Pluto in Libra generation. It's about 4 degrees in the ninth house. So Pluto is in the early degrees of Libra. So just from 0 to 30 degrees, if we look at that as a mini beginning to end, this is a soul who is still really learning some of these lessons of fairness and equality in relationships. Pluto and Libra souls in general gravitate towards relationships. They are orientated towards the other as much as themselves, and sometimes even more than themselves. Sets up that lesson of that Aries polarity point of learning to find their own initiative and their own independence and who they are, regardless of any relationships. The soul has Pluto early on in the ninth house. If you look at it having been Pluto 4 degrees Libra, and the ninth house is from 28 Virgo to 4 degrees Scorpio. We see we have the sign Libra and its polarity Aries intercepted in the ninth house. Now, briefly, evolutionary astrology will not look at it from the traditional perspective. Sometimes when signs are intercepted, it's because that energy has been so overly developed in a past life. There's not necessarily a reason to emphasize it on a house cusp in this lifetime. How do you know when it's been overly developed? Again, observe, correlate, interaction with the soul involved. But you can look to see how many planets are in Libra, Aries. You can look to see how many planets are We're the rulers, excuse me, of Libra and Aries, which in this case would be Venus and Mars. You can look to see where they are and how strongly aspected are they. You start putting all that together, and if it seems to be fairly active, then perhaps again, this energy and arc of these sign archetypes may have been emphasized before and do not need it in this current life. We'll explore that as we get to that entire chart moving through this. Pluto a little early on in the ninth house. This is a Sagittarian soul. And so they're going to be orientated to their right brain and their intuition to some degree. They're going to be orientated towards, searching for their group, their tribe, their people that they connect to and relate to. This will be even emphasized with the Pluto and Libra. Where's my tribe? Where's the souls that I get along with? Pluto early on in the ninth house, it could be possible that this soul could feel alienated because one of the distortions of the ninth house in Sag is what we will call compensation. If we can't stand in our truth, ninth house Sag, we will compensate on it. We will go along to get along. We will live a personal quote unquote lie. I don't mean that in strict terms. I mean, we'll just live what the consensus environmental conditionings were we were raised in, feeling alienated from it. And the reason for the alienation is to get us to break away and find our own truth. We'll work more with the third house polarity here later on, but one of the classics of the third house polarity is recognizing there's a relativity of truths. There are many paths home. Pluto Libra may not be quite so defensive of their beliefs, say, if Pluto was in Leo and the ninth house, and I'm right, you're wrong. My God has the truth and your God's a lie. Pluto Libra will be a little, they can have that Libra religious extremism, but that's not the norm for the Pluto Libras. They're more of, well, what do you believe and what do you think? They do more of that Libra interaction and curiosity, and then adapt into the beliefs of whatever the group is that they might be hanging around with from year to year, or decade to decade, etc. Now, the other thing to look at here is the rulers of Pluto by sign and house. And again, in EA, a planet in a sign and a planet in a house are equal, or half the sign, half the house, to really get a planetary archetype, no matter what it is. Ruler of Pluto in Libra is Venus. Look at Venus hanging out 28 degrees Libra. One more picture to add in there. And not only that, Venus is also the ruler of that intercepted sign Libra. The ruler by house is Jupiter, ruling that ninth house. And Jupiter is in a first quarter aspect to that ruler, Pluto. So Venus being in Libra, being in the same sign, being new phase of that Pluto, that brings a little more relationship activity into the picture, still orientated towards relationships, but perhaps at 28 degrees Libra, over time, this person may be starting to have a little more discernment, Libra, over what they value, Venus, in relationships and how they want to be in relationships with others. They could value having deeper and deeper orientations towards truth. And some of the other environmental conditioning for this volunteer, she shared that she's not good at small talk and dislikes small talk. That's a ninth house Pluto. And that Venus is bringing in that value towards that. Now, Jupiter being our conscious beliefs, intuition, right brain growth. In there in Capricorn 12th house, she may have had intuition suppressed early on. She may have been caught up in consensus religions from either, family or societal conditionings early on. And as time went on, she could be really breaking free from all of that. And if you've been paying any attention to where the transits are right now and that transiting Saturn, she really could be breaking free quite intensely right now in I'm going to choose what I believe, not what's been conditioned upon me. At this point, I want to just briefly stop and see if we could unmute our volunteer and hear a little feedback. Leroy, are you there?
Here I am.
Hi, volunteer.
Hello.
All right, thank you. It's always nice when I can have another live voice on the other end.
Well, this is
Welcome.
thank you very much. It's amazing just in these last few minutes what you've brought out, all kinds of things that I've been thinking about lately. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure. Any feedback in regards to that Venus Pluto or that Jupiter Pluto? Again, these are going to be two important planets because they're the rulers of the soul. And so I kind of
Right.
emphasize it as I teach these classes on chart interpretation. And especially your Pluto, or excuse me, your Jupiter first quarter square Pluto. I mean, do you feel that you were more caught up in consensus type belief systems early on with this Jupiter signature? Hmm? Did our volunteer mute herself, or did Leroy mute her?
Oh, she's unmuted, but I lost
Okay, was that you, Leroy? With all the noise?
Yeah, she got offline somehow, so she's going to
Oh,
re-enter.
okay. All right. I'll continue on. Will you just watch for her to get back on the class, Leroy, and then when she does, feel free to interrupt me, okay?
Yep, that's what I'm here for.
Thank you. I'm going to move on till we get our volunteer back. And so then the next thing that you will look at to put a more complete picture of Pluto, the soul, into this is looking at the aspects that are made to Pluto. And the EA teachings would say that anytime you start to get beyond 4 or 5 aspects to Pluto, then the soul is really coming in to accelerate the evolutionary pace. If Pluto's only making 1, 2, 3 aspects to other planets, then the soul is in a slower evolutionary pace and looking a little bit more at, you know, taking a rest, taking a break. And of course, then you will also always look to see whether or not Pluto is retrograde. We do not have a retrograde Pluto in this particular situation. However, we
Kim.
do have Pluto. Yes, did I get our volunteer?
Yeah, Mary's back. I'm going to unmute her.
Okay.
Let's try that, Mary. Are you back?
I hope I am.
Aw.
Sorry about that.
Oh, hey, here's our techno world. You were present when I wasn't last month, okay? So I went ahead and showed the screen that said, look at the aspects to Pluto. And when we start to have, 4, 5, 6 or more aspects, it's the soul's trying to do a little faster pace at evolving versus Pluto having 1 or 2 aspects. And so I just brought into the picture the fact that Pluto basically is aspecting 6 planets. The new semi-sextile to Mars, and of course the wide sextiles to 3 planets in Sag with the Mercury retrograde. And of course, we talked about that first quarter square to Jupiter, which is what I asked you about. And then Mars is in, what did I have for Mars? Excuse me here. In, no, not Mars, Moon. I'm sorry, Moon. Yes, I was going. Moon is in a disseminating quarter or square to Pluto, meaning just before last quarter, but it's getting within orb. So, volunteer, back to that question that I asked when we got interrupted. Do you feel that with Jupiter in Capricorn 12th, first quarter to Pluto, do you feel that you were a little more suppressed and conditioned by consensus belief systems when you were younger?
I think so, definitely. And that's something that I've been thinking about in the last few years, several years.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the term breaking away several times, and that's, kind of been a theme of something that I've been thinking about. I do really well with thinking about things, but not really acting on them. And, I always think about if I'm going to break free in some way, in some area of my life, how is that going to affect my different relationships? So that's
Mm-hmm.
something
You,
I've been.
yeah. Both comments, I'm going to just put the astrology into your comments. The Pluto in Libra generation is very good at thinking about it or talking about it or getting one more opinion or a little more feedback, but they're not always good at doing that Aries initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, and I'm going to bring in the forecasting into part of this picture as well, with Saturn, I don't know, I can't remember where Saturn went retrograde. 9 Capricorn. Ooh, Saturn stationary retrograde on your Jupiter early. When was that? Or mid-April, okay? you know I would say that urge to act has really been strong with the Saturn forecasting. And
Mm-hmm.
as Saturn, I don't know where Saturn is today. Hold on, I'm going to quick look it up in my little ephemeris here for us to some degree. But as it then goes over your ascendant, it's just getting strong. It goes over your ascendant in late January, and so yeah, you can't. Your Pluto Libra doesn't get to sit on the fence anymore.
Oh, fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I just briefly, if I can, bring in a couple more aspects. The moon, your whole emotional nature, it's going to add to that Gemini sixth house. It's going to add to that pondering picture without necessarily having any action in a disseminating square to Pluto. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The approaching or applying sides of the squares, the crescent and disseminating, they're yin phase. So they're more inner. Whereas when you're past the aspects of first quarter and last quarter squares, those are yang phase. They're more energy moving out. So that moon aspect to Pluto is also, again, adding into I think about it, I ponder it, but I don't necessarily act upon it.
Yeah.
Now, let me give you a little bit of relief as a ninth house Pluto, okay? I remember you made the comment, the fear of flying, and imagine being a Sag that doesn't travel. There are
Mm-hmm.
many more ways to travel than flying, sweetheart, okay? But you're a 0 degree Sag, and your Pluto is early ninth. And look at Mars. Mars is 31 degrees beyond that Pluto. That referring back to those 45-degree aspects between Mars, Pluto, and number of lifetimes, it's possible you're just starting as a ninth house Pluto. Now, I'm not saying you didn't maybe have, somebody push you off of a cliff in past lives. Ninth house Pluto. I'm not a ninth house Pluto, but I have a lot of Sag and ninth house energy in me. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of 2 lifetimes ago, right after World War One, flying my little airplane and clipping the wings, being kind of a little bit of a show off, and both of our small little airplanes went spiraling down. And Leroy and I were out hiking along a cliff edge this last weekend, and he got really close, and I just lost it. I just lost it. And he was very, very sweet. He was like, honey, I just sat down on a log. And I'm going, yeah, and you're 6 inches from falling off. And I said, it was a very close lifetime ago that I crashed my airplane, and that's the same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm not saying you did that, but I'm saying you're just starting out as a ninth house Pluto. And so all that daredevilish stuff, maybe it's a reaction that with that Mars and Scorpio there, or the Jupiter Pluto aspect, but be gentle with yourself, okay?
All right.
And what I'm seeing, hearing you, listening to you with your environmental feedback, you're just opening up this huge door of finding your own truth. And that's the biggest gift that your ninth house Pluto and your Sag planets are giving you. And those Sag planets are all sextiles, waxing sextiles to your Pluto. And so, you know, as you move through this lifetime, it's what's my next step of freedom? What's my next step of freedom? What's my next step of freedom? And how well can you just step into that and be more and more authentically yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at it from the past, the Sag 11th house planets, okay, they could be, classic signatures of trauma in the name of religion. And so it could definitely be an area to explore. The rule of thumb is the Neptune and Sag generation has at least one, if not more than one, lifetime in natural law. Your 3 Sag planets, your ninth house Pluto, the planets in the 6th, ninth, 12th mutable quadrants, your soul has an affinity to natural law. And you're
Mm-hmm.
just uncovering the suppression of that in order to survive. In other words, you suppressed what you naturally knew in order to survive, and you don't have to do it anymore. Okay?
All right.
Any feedback for me on that?
Um, yeah, it's a little scary, but but exciting as well. But I always go back to, gosh, do I need to let go of relationships or affect other people in if I make these kinds of decisions or these kinds of moves? And I would really like for things to maybe just happen to me so I don't have to make those kinds of decisions.
I know. And Pluto Libra is the cardinal modality. It's finding your initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, you may surprise yourself at others adapting to your initiative as you move forward.
Fingers
Okay.
crossed. All right.
Yeah, and again, I'll lose my relationships if I really be me. And perhaps that is a conditioning factor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be that Mars new phase Pluto. This is going to be what your risk is. Finding that courage. And then, oh, by the way, others adapt to me a little rather than you always adapting to others. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let Leroy mute you while we go into the nodal axis, and then I'll bring you back on again. Okay.
All right.
All right, everyone. So we got a little bit of background on that soul of this chart. And so now we're going to move into looking at the South Node. And again, from EA's perspective, the natal South Node by house, sign, the planetary rulers of house, sign, and the aspects to the South Node all represent the ego from the past. That soul in many of us will tend to operate somewhat unconsciously, sometimes almost all unconscious. The gift of EA is it becomes conscious, but the ego is a little closer to the surface. And this is the prior mode of operation on emotional levels that allowed that prior karmic dynamic or the soul to be actualized. So the South Node is where we emotionally gravitate to on egoic reasons to feel secure, but it also can be an avenue that the soul itself operates through, or at the very least, it's part of this picture with the soul and how it expresses itself. So we got a little bit of clarity on the soul. Let's go along and well, first of all, here I am, again, I'm always emphasizing this. Oh, my south node's in blah, blah, blah. Well, what house is your south node? Both have equal weight. Okay. So the ruler of the south node by sign, the ruler of the south node by house, and you can even make aspects to those rulers, of course. They are also going to give us the additional information to the ego from the past. It's going to be more details. So let's first of all now just briefly look at where the south node is and the rulers to the south node. The soul has South Node in Cancer, about 18 degrees, just inside the seventh house, with about 15 degrees Cancer on the descendant. So the South Node is approaching a conjunction to the descendant, the seventh house cusp. The ruler of the South Node by sign is that moon in Gemini 6 we spoke about earlier that has the disseminating square to Pluto. And the South Node's in the seventh house. So Venus is not only ruling the soul itself, Venus is ruling the ego of the past by house. Now, those are two personal planets. Moon, Venus. They're not, the South Node's not ruled by outer planets. It's ruled by inner planets. So that really kind of gives that ego from the past even more subjectivity because they're personal planets. It's our emotions and our ability to value self, relate to ourself, give and receive love with others. So just wanting to put a little bit of emphasis to that into this picture for you in being able to understand this. So this is also because the South Node's in the seventh house, the Libra house, going to add on to this picture of relationships and why this soul with Pluto Libra is so orientated to other. Not only is the soul that way, but so is the ego of the past. And so relationships, relationships, relationships. And oh, by the way, another little tidbit that came through with the environmental conditioning was this volunteer shared that she married her first serious boyfriend. So she didn't say how long she's been married, and perhaps you can share that, volunteer. But, you know, sometimes South Node, sometimes Pluto in Libra or seventh house, and sometimes a South Node in Libra or seventh house can be the serial monogamous. Sometimes they'll be in a long-term relationship for, again, long periods of time. They won't change the relationship. Is it because of extremes of codependency? Sometimes it can be. Other times it can be, it's just that's the relationship and that's their orientation. And so the idea of moving on just, isn't even part of the equation for them. Let's unmute our volunteer and just hear from her on the rulers of the South Node briefly, Leroy.
Hello?
I can hear you.
All right. Well, just to answer one of your last questions, I've been married for about 20 years, and I was with my husband for probably about 8 years before that. So it is a long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And a Saturn cycle, if you add 20 and 8, 28, 29 Saturn cycles. So just generically, it would be that the reality of the relationship, Saturn, may be undergoing some changes.
All
That'll
right.
add into the picture of those planets in Capricorn crossing over the ascendant. We digress though. So you're getting a picture on this South Node with rulers being Moon and Venus,
I think
and
so.
you
Yeah.
know, just Moon in the sixth is moving towards the seventh. The sixth house can be his relationship. It's moving towards relationships and it's orientated toward the other person. person in relationships coming off of the fifth house egoicness. And then you have the other ruler, Venus, over there in Libra. So even the rulers of your South Node orientate you on an emotional level towards relationships. But oh,
Yep.
by the way, picture will come along here with North Node and third house or Aries polarity point of, again, finding the initiative and courage to be responsible for yourself. We'll talk more on that a little bit later. I'm just trying to bring up some tidbits for everybody. And so, have you, let me ask you this, a couple more environmental conditioning questions, if I may.
Hmm.
Did you ever live by yourself?
I did. I mean, in college, I lived by myself, and then after college, I moved to Mexico, and I lived, with some girlfriends in an apartment there for about 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Did you live on campus all the way through college?
Yep, I did.
And when you lived on campus, did you have a single apartment or did you have roommates?
For about, it was just 1 year, my last year, when I had no roommates, when I was, I guess, by myself.
Can you remember that? How did that go?
That was nice.
Good,
Yeah.
good, good.
I actually enjoy being by myself a lot. Um, but being by myself, but in a relationship, if that makes sense. I mean, I enjoy time by myself. Um,
The freedom of being alone under certain conditions which help you feel secure.
mhm.
That's Pluto in the ninth, and that's South Node in Cancer seventh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that information. Anything else from your perspective with Moon, Venus ruling South Node?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Don't mean to put you on the spot, okay? Uh, let's I'm gonna have Leroy briefly mute you, and then we're gonna bring in the aspects, okay? And so again, the next thing that I want us to look at is the aspects to the South Node. And could we look at aspects to Venus and aspects to Moon, rulers of the South Node? Yes. For time purposes, I have not brought those into these 3 months of chart example. I do not mean to neglect them. I just have to be a little conscious of time. So if we look at the number of aspects to the South Node, there are actually 6 planetary aspects to the South Node. Now, I bring in the North Node here because 2 of these aspects are square the nodes, okay? And so what we have here is South Node making a balsamic semi-sextile to Saturn. We have the South Node making, what is it? Hold on, I gotta look at some of these. Mercury is within orb of a waxing in conjunct, I think oops, wait a minute. Nope, I got it. Nope, okay, here it is. Sorry about that. Starting with the Sag planets, nodes are always compared to every planet. Starting with the Sag planets going clockwise, reversing mean motion of the nodes. The South Node is a waxing sesquisquadrate. It's applying to the sun. It is separating with Neptune and separating sesquisquadrates with Mercury. Okay, we'll talk about that, but probably what we can notice more easily is the fact that, of course, you know, here we have one of the wide gibbous oppositions of Chiron retrograde, Aries third, to Uranus up here in Libra, 21 degrees. Now, they're both square the nodes. Starting with Uranus, reversing through the zodiac houses. The south node is the resolution node for Uranus square the nodes. It is separating. It is past 21 degrees. Starting with Chiron at 13 degrees Aries retrograde, reversing through the signs houses. It is the north node is the resolution node for Chiron, and the nodes are applying squares to Chiron. Okay, separating squares with Uranus square the nodes, applying squares with Chiron square the nodes. And by the way, any of the newer associates to EAN, we did a whole series on planets square the nodes, planets square the nodal axes. If you want to search for those classes and get more details. So we again have, I include Chiron in the planets these days. We have 6 planets and aspects to the nodes. The nodes and Pluto are both very active. And so there's a lot of, just in general, when you look at 6 planets aspecting the nodes, there's a lot of emotional nodes, growth going on for this soul. Now, all these planets are aspecting the south node. All these planets are aspecting the north node. I'm just going to start with the south node here in these sesquisquadrates, waxing sesquisquadrates. You look at everything the opposite way with the nodes. This is going from first quarter to gibbous phase. And so here is all of that emotional sensitivity with this south node signature, basically at odds with the Sag freedom and search for objectivity, 11th house. This is the tension. The semi-squares and sesquisquadrates have as much tension as squares do, as oppositions do. We just don't notice it. And so I pointed out, especially in these type of classes, this is, again, tension between freedom and security. So this is adding on to that picture for you, volunteer, of why you don't feel like the typical Sag. Because all that Sag energy is tied into that south node by aspect. Okay? Now, if we want to, the Chiron-Uranus opposition, they had, oh gosh, I can't remember. I think it was, I want to say 40-some oppositions. I always forget that. It's either 26 or 40-some oppositions over the course of about 3 decades in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So there's a whole mini generation of souls who are really having to objectify opposition, their wounds and trauma, Chiron, Uranus. And the better they are at healing their woundedness, the more they can objectify the trauma and break free and turn all of that into healing gifts and the healing arts. That's the generics of the Chiron-Uranus opposition. And then it starts to become specific by the signs and the houses. The Chiron-Uranus opposition in Aries Libra is going to reiterate the Pluto and Libra generational stuff. And the fact that Chiron over here is opposite, or is retrograde, it's going to be point back to all of the relationship karma And let me back up. The Chiron in Aries retrograde is going to tell us that there is wounding with failed initiations moving forward. This soul has tried to be independent before, tried to really find that ability to initiate and move forward. And for whatever reasons, it was either aborted or it wasn't successful. They weren't allowed to do it. The partner, threatened to take away all the resources if they didn't come back home or whatever. Who knows what some of the details have been, or, could have been a society in which, it was arranged marriage and she was never given, the opportunity to even go for any freedom. But you see how it starts to reiterate that picture between all the relationship history and the wounds around being able to break free. Add that on to those planets square the nodes, and we know that there were families of origin. There was familial karma. There was intimate relationship karma that got involved in this picture of controlling what the soul could and could not do. And so it may be that this physical control isn't here in this lifetime anymore, but it may feel like it's there energetically, emotionally, psychologically. Volunteer. Let's unmute Leroy and get some feedback and interaction from our volunteer.
All right, I'm here.
All right, we can hear you.
So ask me a specific question.
Okay. The first thought that was popping into my mind, well, it's the relationship, the intimate relationship and parents. We're going to go in both those directions, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Little more feedback on hubby. Is he controlling? Is he acquiescent? If whatever you feel comfortable in sharing in regards to the relationship. Does it go back and forth over who's dominating who? Little feedback, if you
Yeah.
will.
Well, his rising sign and his Mars are both in Aries, so he is a little bit in quotation marks more dominant, and I always find myself acquiescing and saying, "Sure, hubby. Sorry, hubby. Whatever you want, hubby. Just calm down, calm down, relax. Everything's okay." Smoothing things over.
Do you know the degrees of his Mars in the ascendant? Off the top of your head? If you don't, it's fine.
No, I feel like the ascendant is pretty much right in the middle of Aries, and I think Mars is, gosh, it's right on either side, and I don't remember. I think
You
Mars.
don't remember?
Yeah, I think Mars is in the first house, actually, close to the ascendant.
That kind of sounds like that. And so his ascendant and Mars are going to be right down here. He's your mirror to break free. He's your mirror to express yourself. And so whatever you're suppressing, your partner's acting out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. And then his Mars, chances are square this, but that's getting into compatibility, and I better stick with stick with your chart. I know that you had said that you were very close to your dad, and you still feel your dad's energy with you, even non-physical. Mom, oil and water personalities. Was mom controlling? Is mom controlling?
Yes. Mom is a elementary school principal, retired. She's very rules oriented. She is more and more religious as the days go by. Um, you know, a lovely woman, if you were to meet her, lovely personality, very giving. I mean, she's a good person. It's just um, we have very different personalities and value different things.
Mm-hmm. So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm kind of hearing here is that, uh, you know, you have a parent, mom, and a partner that is a little more on the domineering side compared to you.
Yes.
And so they're probably the two closest relationships that are pushing you to be yourself.
Yes, and I will add, you know, my son, my 8-year-old son is showing a very strong personality, very opinionated, and knows what he wants and does his best to get it. So he's another part of the equation, I think.
Mm, mm. Part of me would like to be a little mouse in the room as you find yourself standing up to everybody.
Hey, I'll invite you. I'll pay your plane ticket. You can come out and
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Kimmery? Feedback here. Well,
yeah.
it's okay. I'm gonna try and keep myself away from that north node and that Pluto polarity point because I just want to jump right in. Okay, and so we'll try and be a little systematic here just for sake of teaching in regards to the whole class. And but as we look at where your soul's coming from, and we start to put some of those pictures together. Um it is kind of, and here, let me just briefly go through this, okay? I explained when planets are square the nodes with the skip steps. So people who will be reviewing this class in the future have this slide to refer to. And then I also talk about the resolution node when it's the south node versus the north node. South node resolution node, something's got to go back. You got to go back to the past and readdress something. North node resolution node, something must be moved forward. And so here is the visual, okay? Just wanting to show everybody this person's chart with the planets square the nodes. And in this slide, what I've done is I've brought in the entire chart, okay? All the aspects. And so as we start to look at where your soul is coming from, volunteer, to me, I see the impression that you have been trying to figure out how to initiate moving forward, being you, being authentic to yourself, ninth house Pluto, taking charge of your own life. Um, and I would say probably doing it through relationships, okay? Pluto Libra, these Libra planets, the South Node in Cancer 7th, doing it through relationships, specifically with the people that you were not successful doing it with in the past. And again, no judgments here. Not saying, you yourself said it, mom's a giving, nice person, but in your karma with her, South Node Cancer 7th, there's a controlling aspect, and there's going to be certain levels of, control issues, domination issues with probably both husband and son. And so these people that you're closest to, the ruler moon and Venus of the South Node, the people you're the closest to are the ones that you're really having to stand up to be independent with. And I remember saying early on when I didn't have the whole chart in front of me, although I looked at it, going, oh, I'm just getting this intuitive hit that this person, as you break free, that you might be surprised how everybody else goes, oh, okay, all right, yeah. They might, scream to the high heavens and throw a little temper tantrum, but guess what? They're the ones who kind of go along to get along to some degree as you stand up, speak up. Now, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I think what concerns me even more, I'm thinking about my mom, and I don't know if this is significant, but um, I'm not so much concerned about her getting mad. It's her being so sad about decisions that I've made, or you know, um, she's come to me the last couple of Christmases and said, the only thing that she wants for Christmas with tears in her eyes is for her grandson to be baptized. And so, finally I said, yes, sure, we'll do that. But it's the pain that I see rather than anger. It's more concern over hurting people.
About like my Sun in Libra mother doing a passive aggressive and going, oh, it'd be so nice if you girls, if the family would all go to Christmas Eve service together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's that consensus energy. And depending upon where we want to be, we can do that individuated rebellion and go, no flipping way am I going to do that. And for me, I had, a nice little conversation with my hubby and saying, just want you to know this is what mom is asking for Christmas. And, you get to choose for yourself. But when we get into that spirituated consciousness, we've got to be able to hold individuated and consensus within our arms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, spirituated can go off in their ivory tower and say, fluff you, consensus. And that's not walking the talk of
Mm-hmm.
natural law. Now, I'm not in any way trying to tell you what to do. I am sharing that with your Uranus square the nodes and that need to really break free and be who you are, regardless of anybody else. You still have to go back to all those old relationships, South Node, and go, who do I want to be with? Who do I not want to be with? How do I want to be with that person? How do I not want to be with that person? Can I be me through any and all relationship circumstances? That's Uranus resolving itself through the South Node. And it can be this Uranus signature with Libra ninth house, okay? It can be you having a sense of yourself. I know who I am. I know how my belief system is expanding and evolving. I know how I'm tapping in to more and more natural principles and in my knowing ninth house of that. I don't have to be threatened or feel like I'm going to have it taken away from me as I work my way through these old familial relationships and patterns. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Very interesting. Lots of food for thought.
Mhm. Yeah. It's just about it's kind of like how some parents today are choosing whether or not to get vaccinations for a child. You know, it's the same thing with, you know, and it's your choice, or you and hubby's choice, of whether or not you um, choose to, you know, baptize your child.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, and again, this we can start to bring in, you know, Uranus. These three planets are all new phase Pluto. And by the way, as we start to look at this Libra intercepted, and you see three planets in Libra, okay, we have one planet in Chiron, but these planets are square the nodes. You start to see all this activity in the cardinal modality. So it's quite possible that this Libra Aries interception doesn't need to be emphasized, except that I would disagree with myself on the Aries polarity point. But it's the lesson regardless of whether it's emphasized or not. Again, maybe there was those prior initiations that didn't go so well. Yeah, there's the Aries energy. My point is, you know, there's energy here of really opening yourself up to new understandings, you know, broader and broader connections to what is natural spiritual principles that, again, allow for an understanding within your soul, even if you're not acting out there in that physical world to the degree or desire you wish you were or would be. Am I making sense in what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And this is coming back in many ways, even to the fact that, again, Mars is, you know, only a semi-sextile beyond Pluto. It's, you haven't had that many ninth house Pluto lifetimes. And, you know, Mars 30 degrees from Pluto in any sign, any houses, it's new. And so to just grasp the philosophy of that ninth house is probably one of the biggest things for your soul this lifetime.
It's interesting because I was thinking with all of these, planets and Sag and stuff in the ninth house that I should have had this archetype all down. I was ready to graduate, I thought.
Your sun's 0 degrees 30 or 0 degrees Sag, babe.
All right.
And again, that's why I pointed out that the south node is, you know, the 135 degrees, the waxing sesquisquadrate. So here's that tension between that freedom and emotional security. So that's why I've been specifically trying to point out a few of these pictures and aspects to help you, you know, go, oh, this is why I'm not the typical Sag.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the ruler, Jupiter, Capricorn, 12th house. You know, there's suppression and, you know, hiding out. That's part of that picture as well.
All
Okay.
right. All right.
All right. Okay, well, I'm past my hour for the karmic dynamic, so we're going to mute you and we're going to jump forward, okay? So hopefully this is giving everybody a little bit of a picture of where this soul is coming from. And so now we're going to move into what EA calls that evolutionary intent. And this is where we start to look at the polarity point of natal Pluto, or what we will call the Pluto polarity point. This is where the soul is intending to evolve in any given lifetime. Now, when we look at that polarity point, we will look at what sign it's in, what house it's in, and the aspects. Every aspect in natal Pluto is an aspect to the Pluto polarity point. And so that polarity point by sign is the generational lessons in this life for that soul. And Pluto polarity point by house is the individual lessons for that soul. So let's just look at this at the briefly at this moment. We've gotten down that we have a ninth house Pluto in Libra. So the polarity point becomes Aries and third house. We've been speaking briefly, the ability to be free and be, initiate on whatever instinctive level their soul desires. The third house Pluto polarity point is the individual lessons. The basic is the relativity of truth. And it's it's the ability to be curious. The third house, Gemini. Oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? Oh, what about this? What about that? Just remembering where the South Node in Cancer, seventh house, is coming from. With this Pluto polarity point, this is a soul who has to initiate and get the feedback. This is a soul that I don't care how many times she falls off the bicycle, she's got to get back on the bicycle and try again. Doesn't matter how wounded that Chiron in Aries from trying to break free in past lives. What matters is that she tries and tries and tries and tries again. And it's not going to turn out perfect. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be upsets. There's going to be, oh, well, that didn't work. Well, I guess I'll try it another way. It's just that openness, third house, to being curious and go, well, let's explore this. Let's explore that. That's the energy the soul's really trying to go for. Now, we then also can look at where the number of aspects that we make to that Pluto polarity point, and that starts to tell us again the evolutionary pace of the soul and how, much they're going to be working to metamorphose in this lifetime. As we had already discussed before, this is the same slide where we looked at all the aspects to Pluto. Those aspects are happening to the Pluto polarity point. Now, we make this the 0-degree point. This is the starting point. And so this is 3 degrees Aries, okay? The moon is a crescent phase to the Pluto polarity point. This is going to bring in some of the emotional insecurities. Do I or don't I? Do I or don't I? This also adds to that picture of, I think about it, but do I take action? Jupiter, this is the 0 point. So we go 3/4 of the way around the circle. And Jupiter is a last quarter square to the Pluto polarity point. The last quarter square is that crises in consciousness. And so here's where Jupiter can get 12th house confused, or Capricorn. Oh gosh, I can feel how everybody else will respond, and I've got to be responsible. We talked about that suppression of the beliefs early on for this soul. But as this soul just naturally evolves in this life, and this signature all on its own is just going to mature, even without any forecasting aspects, to the point where this soul starts to go, but wait a minute. How am I responsible to myself and what I need to do for me? Interesting. Now, these Sag planets make waning trines to the Pluto polarity point. This will also then show us with 11th house Sag that with time, this soul has the potential to become more and more objective about herself, about her relationships, about life, especially as she spiritually and philosophically questions anything and everything. Um, Mars makes a waning inconjunct to the Pluto polarity point because Mars is in Scorpio. Sooner or later, there will be relationships and different situations that will waning in conjunct outer confrontations that will just put that squeeze on that says, are you going to cling to the past and what everybody else says, thinks, does, wants, demands, or are you going to have those situations with others, outer confrontations, waning in conjunct, that squeezes you or makes you go, wait a minute, what about me? What about me? Leroy, would you bring our volunteer live again?
Hello.
Hi there.
Well, one little aha moment when you were talking about that Jupiter and Capricorn. And I've been trying to figure out what Capricorn meant for my lifetime. And I kept thinking of it in terms of responsibility to others. I never thought of responsibility to myself.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah,
Jupiter last quarter square, the Pluto polarity point.
got it.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And so if you want to, when you kind of feel stuck and how do I move forward, you can just leave out the nodal axis for a moment and you could just look at this slide because these planets that aspect the soul also aspect its evolutionary intent. So when you're trying to go, what about me? Like again, you can pull out these aspects to the Pluto polarity point and just intuitively ponder on them. And so you can also use it when you're in some of that moon signature, emotional, mental, circular thinking and worry warding and analyzing, and when you need that courage to just go fluff it, I just got to take an action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some of it. And remember, Aries is action reaction. And so it is that courage to just put one foot in front of the other. And the story will unfold however it's best for you, as long as you are finding that courage to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to mute you again unless you have other
Nope,
comments.
that's good.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to be a little more conscious of time. So now let's start to add in that north node. And so this is the ego that we're creating, that is unfolding within us on emotional levels. And as we are developing the north node, ego of the future, it will then become a mode of operation or a tool that will allow the Pluto polarity point to be actualized. So again, this is how the soul is going to start moving forward emotionally, evolving egoically. Now, we could also take into consideration the planetary ruler of the North Node by sign and the planetary ruler of the North Node by house. They will also describe more detail or additional areas in this life in which we are evolving on an emotional or egoic basis. And we will also be moving the soul's evolutionary intent forward through these planetary rulers as well. Now, one more time, I did not include the aspects to the planetary rulers. They are part of the picture. We are just not looking at them today for the sake of time. And so, where's the North Node? About 18 degrees Capricorn, just inside an ascendant at about 15 degrees Capricorn. Because the nodes reverse, okay, the nodal axis is actually approaching the ascendant. That means that this soul is basically finishing up a nodal axis cycle in some way. Because when the north node moves over the first and goes into the 12th, the north node starts a new nodal axis cycle. So with the south node signature here, applying to the descendant, north node applying to the ascendant, this is a soul who is finishing up old egoic patterns, emotional patterns, egoic patterns on the gender issues. And you can look at this relative to a Pluto and Libra generation. What's it mean to be male? What's it mean to be female? Now, as we've been interacting with this volunteer, I don't really get the impression that this volunteer has done a recent gender change. Volunteer, if you're familiar with your last life or, last few lives, you can let me know. It may be that the next life, this volunteer might choose to come through in the male gender. But just my observing, the listening, the interactions, I'm not really getting that there has been a gender change. I think that this volunteer is coming through with the comfort of that gender for several lifetimes or maybe the last life. But it's finishing up those lessons. They will also be finishing up quite possibly lessons with the family of origin. Maybe these two parents will not be her parents or her children for a lifetime or two down the road. Doesn't mean the karma is all the way done with them, but it could be it's reached a certain point where there is a rest from interacting specifically with these parents. Again, I don't pretend to be the know-all here and bringing this up because it's what the patterning can show with South Node, North Node, both Balsamic, the horizontal axes, and specifically North Node, Balsamic, the first house. Now, you look at the rulers of the North Node here, and the ruler of the sign Capricorn is Saturn over here in Gemini, retrograde, late in the 5th house. And the ruler of the 1st house, of course, Mars, is up here over in Scorpio. As we had talked before, the 30 degrees new phase to Pluto. Just bringing in this North Node and those rulers, Mars, Saturn, initiation, growing up, taking charge, standing in our own power, being able to kind of find our way in, this North Node right inside this ascendant. Again, it's balsamic. So there's a duality going on in that, to have it in that so close to the 1st house and so close to that ascendant I want to initiate, I want to take charge. And yet there can be time periods where it can feel like an old energy. Why can't I do it? Why can't I do it? Now, another little interesting tidbit for you, and this is, I want to point this out for our volunteer. If you start with Saturn and you go over here to Mars, Mars is in a sesquisquadrate, waxing sesquisquadrate to Saturn. And it's a degree past, if my math on my program, I'm going to do this one more time. Yeah, it's a degree past if the math on my program is correct. And so what we kind of have going on here is the two rulers of the North Node being sesquisquadrate to each other, beginnings of gibbous phase. These two can bring in doubt, gibbous phase, insecurity, gibbous phase. Can I really do it? Can I really take charge of my life? And yet, there's that, as I said, sesquisquadrate, square and a half. There's that tension. Ooh, I've got to figure it out. I've got to, find the courage and ability to be able to do that. Now, let's look at the fact that Mars is 8 minutes from the midheaven. 8 minutes. This is a signature that over time, this is a soul that's going to find the courage, Scorpio, to take charge of their life in every way possible, because they've got to in order to grow and evolve emotionally. And again, think of the midheaven, 0 degrees Capricorn, okay? Capricorn, what happens with it? There's so much that can be suppressed early on in life. And just by the nature of time, Saturn, Capricorn, 10th house, starts to become more and more mature and even courageous, because it's that social maturation. So to have the ruler of the North Node so close to the midheaven, so even though there is this tenseful sesquisquadrate aspect between these two rulers, this Mars up here is just, it's pulling this soul forward to find herself, to initiate, to, break free in whatever way she perceives that needs to happen. Let me, Leroy, if you could, um, uh, um, unmute our volunteer and let me get a little feedback.
All right. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a lot. So I'm 46. I'm wondering when this this bucket of courageousness is going to hit me.
Well, transiting Pluto over your ascendant and your North Node,
Yeah.
it's made you conscious. And now you got transiting Saturn, and transiting Jupiter is going to follow through after the next Jupiter return you're going to have. I'd say you're in the midst of doing it now. And
Yeah.
again, if I may point out, I want you to see this from the inner journey perspective as much as, whether or not you busted down the front door because you were mad. I want you to, and, I forgot to ask you something. How long have you been studying evolutionary astrology?
Astrology in general just kind of hit my radar in September of 2016. So I've just been studying very informally since then, and I didn't come across evolutionary astrology for several months there, so it's very new.
Mm-hmm. So a year and a half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If I may, and I'm just speaking to the method, okay? I think just finding evolutionary astrology is ripping the doors wide open for your soul.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, wow,
Right.
didn't recognize that.
Well, and the timing
So,
was right when Pluto was going over our, you know, North Node and ascendant and all of that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I say this just about every session I have with a client. Your soul doesn't give a damn what your chronological age is. The lesson comes when the lesson comes.
Yeah.
So, there you be, my dear.
All right.
So, can you see how the rulers of that North Node, they have their tension between themselves, and yet they also are kind of part of this maturation picture for you emotionally
Mm-hmm.
that's really helping you with, again, finding your own sense of who you are versus who you are not. Aries polarity point, Pluto Libra.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first step. That has to come before the action reaction, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, sweetie, I'm going to mute you one more time, and we're going to add in the aspects to the North Node, and then we'll look at the whole chart, okay? So then we also will look at the aspects to the North Node. That's going to also fill in some details in regards to how the soul is evolving emotionally in order to actualize their soul's intent in this life. And every aspect that the South Node had, the North Node will have. And so in this case, again, nodes are always compared to the planet. We had all already shown that the oops. Oh, I did it. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm just going to bring this in. This is, well, no, wait a minute. Let me back up. Sorry about that. That was the Ho chart. These are the planets that specifically aspect North Node. The resolution node for Chiron is the North Node. And so for Chiron's healing of woundedness to being able to be free, initiate, who am I, explore, be spontaneous, is re-emphasized by the North Node in the first house, saying it's just about moving forward. And if you keep moving forward, that's what will allow you to have that freedom to mature into who you are authentically. The Saturn is making the North Node is a again reversing here with the nodes, is a waxing in conjunct to Saturn. We didn't speak to that when we looked at it as a ruler, but so it adds to that. Yeah, waxing in conjuncts are inner adjustments. So there's that self-doubt, that insecurity of, can I really take charge of my own life? Because what can happen here with both Chiron and Uranus square these nodes is that whenever this soul in past lives attempted to be free, to take charge of its own life, something didn't follow through, or, they didn't live long enough, something, didn't work out. And they ended up falling back on the relationships and the family, and so there's a real insecurity in the soul believing, ninth house Pluto, that it can completely take charge of its life. Now, it can do it in certain areas or certain periods of time, but this soul is learning how to do it from an emotional perspective throughout time, under any and all circumstances. Now, the North Node is waning semi-squares to all of these Sag planets. What this will bring in can sometimes be, especially early on, it was perhaps a suppression of their own intuitive hits, the suppression North Node in Capricorn. You put these three planets together in Sag, in the 11th house, and this can be visionary. This can be someone who can get strong intuitive hits. Example might be with, meeting her husband for the first time and just getting this strong hit. Uh-oh, that's the one. You know, can come in other ways too. And I don't know if any of these are true. I'm just giving these as example. An intuitive hit of knowing she was pregnant before there was anything that would physically show her or support her. Who knows how the visions could come through. The distortions with the 11th house is that the intuitive hit into the future doesn't come with a date time stamp. And the distortions with Sag is we want it so much, we're just yearning for it, it's meant to be, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. Is it really for our highest and best good? But again, in general, these three planets can be quite intuitive. And one of the things that will evolve with this North Node aspect to the stellium is trusting that intuitive hit or that gut sense when it comes. And then that helps give the courage to move forward however she needs to. The North Node being in a disseminating square to Uranus is that ever evolving ability to be able to say, this is who I am and this is who I'm not. And I will take care of myself as best as I can. I will take care of responsibility for myself so that Uranus signature gets more and more and more to fairness and equality. Now, let's bring in the entire chart. And if I may, could we unmute our volunteer one more time, Leroy? Thank you.
I'm back.
Hello there. Starting to get a picture of your chart?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like there's work to be done.
Well, have I been emphasizing you breaking free, moving forward? And have I just been saying it's about doing it internally as much as anything in an external action? The external actions will naturally follow through as you do it internally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally.
And it sounds like you think this may have been something that I've been working on, maybe not too successfully in past lives.
Let's say partial success. And you want the whole enchilada, right?
Right. So I don't want to have to repeat these lessons next time around.
Correct. Yes, just exactly it. And, again, with your moon in the 6th, don't take any of this in any way judgmentally, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's just opinions. It's just an observe and correlate. What you don't agree with, you don't have to agree with, okay? Um, it's kind of It's like a starting point that can help you with a fuller understanding of your chart or yourself, your own soul, and how you want to evolve, and grow from here.
Mhm.
You know that old saying, today's the first day of the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's a freedom in and of itself. Um, Let me check in and just see, do you have questions for me? Questions about anything in your chart as you look at it? And I would say the same for anybody who's listening live, if they want to type in the questions to Leroy or if you want to unmute and interact. But let's start with our volunteer. Um, any questions for you? Anything about the chart?
Well, um, and this is something I've addressed already, but just coming in and looking at my chart and thinking about my life, and I've always tried to figure out, these this Capricorn and Aries archetypes are the two of my least favorite archetypes of all. So I was wondering, what goodness, what lessons are there to be learned from these? Why are things pointing towards these archetypes? So
Well, I guess I would ask you a question in return. Are you getting a little bit broader understanding about Capricorn?
yes, I mean it's always felt like kind of the politician, the businessman, you know, I've always that's the way it's felt to me, but thinking more of it in terms of responsibility to myself and my values and that sort of thing, it makes
One of
more sense.
Yes, one of the key phrases for Capricorn 10th house Saturn is self-determination,
Mhm.
taking charge of your own life. That's a North Node in Capricorn. And then
Mhm.
that North Node Capricorn in the first, it's almost like a reiteration of that in the first house. Oh, wait a minute. Self determination, me taking charge of my own life and learning to do it on an emotional level with the North
Mhm.
Node. Now, the whole Aries archetype, one of the things to learn about Aries first house Mars, it's action reaction. It's spontaneous. And one of the distortions you can have with that North Node Capricorn first is, oh, I just got to organize it to just work out perfectly, or I'm not even going to try because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to fail or do it halfway again.
Mhm.
And what you've got to reprogram that emotionally. And it's like, I just got to try and try and try until I succeed.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is that Pluto polarity point again, as well into the picture. One of the things that you will learn to be aware of if you're not already, okay? Pluto in Libra in the ninth house can really get philosophical in their head, but not always have the courage to follow through with action.
Mhm.
And so there can be these points, and this might be part of the Mercury retrograde into the picture. It might be part of the Saturn retrograde. There gets to be this certain point where it's like, okay, enough thinking. I just need to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to
Yep.
tell you, you're going to surprise yourself at how people will adjust.
Yep.
They're not going to leave you this lifetime.
Interesting. Is there any significance, or what is the significance to the nodes retrograde?
The nodes are retrograde 90% of the time.
Mm.
Okay, that's their natural movement. So 90% of us born with the nodes retrograde, there is a sense of being able to find your destiny in life earlier. And I've always kind of seen that more as like career. And I don't mean it with your nodes in Cancer, Capricorn. It just seems like, oh, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm to do. The nodes retrograde also mean throwing off the past emotionally. We talk about this in more detail in the Planet Square, the Nodal Axis series, and I repeat it each month. Okay, um, the past is always in the tension of the present moment in moving forward. And because we want to cling to the past for security reasons, it's what we know. The nodes being retrograde 90% of the time signify being able to throw off that past in order to move forward. Now that's generic. Then you put it specific to the nodes and their signs, houses, aspects. Make sense?
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Leroy, any questions from anybody else on the board?
Well, one nice offering from another associate that came through makes some sense. So I guess I'm trying to check to see if she's mic'd. Why don't I just go ahead and put Brenda on and have her make her statement? Okay. Go ahead, Brenda.
I'm not hearing you if you're... I'm not hearing, so I'm not hearing a voice if she's trying to get on. Maybe she may or may not be mic'd. If you are mic'd, you can type it into the board and let Leroy
Yeah, she
know.
said
And if
she had a headset nearby, but she might.
okay, type it in and Leroy will speak for you.
Well, that's
Hi,
okay.
Brenda.
She just offered me to go ahead and present it. Okay, so I will hear. She basically what she's talking about maybe resetting her cap image. There are some questions I heard very clearly, through Mary's comments about not understanding that Capricorn, and to rephrase it as a positive entity, like the authority that Mary becomes the authority on something very important to her, acting on all that ninth house activity with her vocation. Um, Given her Mars on the MC and Pluto, Venus, Uranus, Libra ninth, and this associate, Brendan says, if she's interested in law, great, advocate, be the authority for those clients who are wounded, and use that power to help them value themselves as you find your power as an individual, because she can encourage you. You'll be able to encourage this through that process of becoming an advocate and authority for others. I thought that was real powerful suggestion.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, great suggestion. Thank you very much, Brenda. I mean, that is that North Node intent, is for you to become your own authority.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime Saturn's retrograde, it's rebellion against authority,
Right.
trying to find your own inner authority.
Okay.
That seemed to me to be the largest epiphany I heard when she kind of questioned the fact that, oh, you mean I'm included in this Capricorn picture?
Yeah.
Oh, how much authority do you want, my dear?
Right.
You're the best authority on yourself.
Right.
And as you find that, yeah, just like the comment was, then how do you choose to go out into the world helping others find their own inner outer authority?
Hmm. But it is interesting because I have been thinking about kind of my lack of authority career-wise and kind of my um, position career-wise. That there's some dissatisfaction there, so there's some things to think about
I would say
there as well.
that would be so natural if you look at where the transits of Pluto, Saturn, and soon to be Jupiter are. I think there will be a rebirthing of your career somehow, some way. And
Hmm.
it's the intent is for you to step up, to step into, you know, a greater position of authority in the world.
Hmm.
And again, relative to where you're at and what you desire.
Sure. And I have no idea right now how that's going to play out, but I'm open to it.
Yeah, open and trust the universe, and it could be there to just kind of naturally unfold.
Hmm.
Mhm. All right. Anybody else? Any other comments? Volunteer, Leroy from the board.
All clear.
Oh, well, volunteer, I want to thank you very, very much. Always appreciate a chart to look at.
No, well, anytime. Hey, anytime you want to look at my chart, and I appreciate this opportunity. Also, it's coming at a good time. I've learned a lot, and I will listen over and over, and I'm sure get something new each time I listen. So thank you.
Oh, you are most welcome. You're most welcome, my dear. All right, so let me move on just quickly and tell you that I did set my subject matter for Jan Feb. The January class is going to go into the fourth Monday because of or fourth Tuesday, excuse me, because of a travel schedule for Leroy and I. I'm going to do the cycle of aspects. I've wanted to do this for a while, and I'm titled it that. If anybody is familiar with Alexander Rupert's book, I think he was German, and that book was reprinted. I still like that book. And so we're going to look at the fact that at 2 years old, you have a Mars return. At 7 years old, you have the first Saturn square. At 12, you have the Jupiter, first Jupiter return. So I'm going to try and look at 0 to 42 years of age generically in part 1, and then 42 to 84, and maybe beyond that in part 2. There will not be any volunteers for these two classes. It's going to be more theory, but it will just be able to give us the chronological age and how various astrological aspects show up according to uh, a generic age, regardless of the chart. And then I'll figure out what I'm going to move into this spring. So stay tuned. You'll get the emails for these classes about, week before. And then, of course, I have my 2019 forecast set for Wednesday, January 2nd. And Leroy has been sending out, I think he's been sending out some email notices about that class already. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope that you have a wonderful solstice, however you enjoy it, with family and friends. Oh, and by the way, this Thursday, December 20th, the EA Zoom meeting, we're going to have a bunch of astrologers. I will have my short little segment. I'm going to look at Jupiter in Sag on the south node of Uranus in Sagittarius. And so you can find them on YouTube, their YouTube channel. And if you're on Facebook, I think it's EA Zoom meetings. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Solstice blessings.